Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Claire, for the invitation, and thank you, Danny, for the great presentation. And thank you for inviting me to talk about one of my favorite topics about Ubuntu, perspective in end-of-life care. So I'm going to share 3 stories. I'm going to share 3 people, 3 lives, 3 moments of suffering, but also 3 different paths that show what truly matters to us in advanced care planning. After the genocide against the Tutsi, I had a simple dream. I wanted to become a pilot, maybe just to escape the reality of the genocide. And I spoke to my father about that dream. One day my father said, "Christian, go to medical school for 1 year. As soon as I get back on my feet," talking about his business, "I will send you to a flying school in Kenya and Uganda." Until today, I'm still waiting for. So life after the genocide was very hard. I thought being a surgeon would be help to rebuilding not just broken bodies, but also broken people too. So I started working on the district hospital before specializing. It was mandatory after the medical school. That's where I met Rafiki. He was 24. He had advanced liver cancer. I still see him like it was yesterday, wearing a red Chicago Bulls t-shirt from 1998, where Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr, and others won the NBA championship. He wore a black pants, lying on a single bed with a white sheet and a thin blanket. But what I remember most was his pain. Not just physical pain, but deep suffering. I still remember his tears, his cries, and his family was watching helpless. He was sent back to his village from the university teaching hospital for continuing treatment. There was no treatment available in Rwanda at that time. If you had cancer, you had to go to Kenya or Uganda. But Rafiki's family couldn't afford it. His medical file said he'd received some strong painkillers, like Demerol, 24 hours ago. But nothing helped. Of course, I feared to mention the word morphine. To us back then, morphine was sacred, the Mona Lisa of opioids, locked away like a treasure. We were taught it was dangerous, that it could even kill. And if something went wrong, prison awaited. I was afraid, so I chose not to give him any more morphine. I wrote, "Continue current treatment." But what does it mean, really? I chose fear instead of compassion. As I left the room, Rafiki's mother followed me, dropped to her knees and begged, "Please help my son sleep and never wake up." She was asking me to give him death. So I couldn't. She left in tears. I hadn't done nothing. Fear had won. Humanity had lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rafiki, about his mother, and I felt 2 deep fears. I failed as a doctor because I didn't ease his pain. But also I failed as a Rwandan because when an elder person kneels in front of a young person and you do nothing, that's a failure culturally. So then I asked myself, why did I spend so many years in medical school if I can't help someone in pain or witness vulnerability and suffering? Why wear a white coat if I can't bring comfort? Why does my medicine feel like it has no soul? So the next day, Rafiki died in agony. His family took his body to the morgue. Everyone looked at me, and I felt guilty, shame, failure. sadness, disgust, and anger. But Rafiki changed my life. He showed me that medicine without soul, without dignity, and without love, it's not medicine. That's why I left my dream to become surgeon and follow a new path, palliative care. So I live in Rwanda. Rwanda is among the smallest country in Africa, not a small nation, with 14 million people. Almost 50% of our population is under 20. But it's also one of the most dense countries with almost 500 people by kilometer square. This is now 30 years after the genocide against the Tutsi, where 1 million people died in 100 days. But humanity itself seems lost during that time. And I strongly believe that the concept of palliative care will contribute to bring back the sense of humanity we lost during the genocide. Why? Because palliative care is not about withdrawing or withholding medication, but mostly about dignity, humanity, and Ubuntu. The country is still rebuilding, and we move from our life expectancy from 28 during 19 to 2000. Now we are on 65. I know in the UK, 65, you are still a teenager. So what is Ubuntu? Ubuntu philosophy means I am because you are. So Ubuntu is an old philosophy and way of life that has so many centuries, sustained in the African communities and South Africa, especially in South Africa, in particular in Africa as well. Ubuntu is not only about human acts, it's about being, it's about disposition. It concerns values that contribute to the well-being and others of the community. Regardless of their social status, gender, or race, persons are recognized, accepted, valued, and respected for their own sake. A person is the cornerstone of the society. People are conscious of the fact that they have a common humanity, which add a certain dignity, integrity, value that needs to be acknowledged, respected, and valued. Individualistic and self-centered acts are not just seen as not contributing to the well-being of both the person and the community, but they are viewed as bringing about harm, misery, and pain to others. Behavioral patterns that are incompatible with Ubuntu lead to tension and conflict among people. Ubuntu is also a philosophy of tolerance and compassion, which also embraces forgiveness. Ubuntu is a included in the best realization and manifestation indeed of the kindness, compassion, caring, sharing, solidarity, and sacrifice. A person is not a thing or a number, but something more valuable than this. Ubuntu also deals with many feelings of compassion related to making life more human for others, especially to care for the disadvantaged, named the sick, the bereaved, the poor, and the strangers. I remember after the story of Rafiki, I went to the training of palliative care. That was my first training of palliative care. And I was expecting to learn about suffering of patients and family members. But surprisingly, it was not about patient suffering. It was about my own suffering. So I have to move from my own suffering to the Ubuntu. One, to understand about self-love. When I embrace self-love, I recognize my limitations, honor patient's emotional need, and accept the imperfections, because a physician who values themselves is better able to value others. Compassion given from the place and of wholeness is more authentic and sustainable. Self-love dismantles the culture of martyrdom than often isolated healthcare workers. A physician who honors their own humanity extends that recognition to patients, not as a cases, but as connected beings. Self-love opens space for radical empathy, where patient feels seen as bodies and persons. So the second step was self-forgiveness, difficult decision, unintended harm, and perceiving inadequacy often haunt healthcare providers. Without forgiveness, guilty fitness into emotional exhausting and detachment. Practicing self-forgiveness allows physicians to let go of shame and fear that block authentic connection. Created psychological space for humility and growth, model vulnerability, making room for mutual healing with the patients. And the most difficult step was self-reconciliation. Because self-reconciliation is the process of making peace with one's own story, and especially the unresolved and painful parts. This was empowering me to be fully present with the patient without the shadow of unresolved internal conflict. Practice medicine not as a performance, but as a vocation rooted in meaning. Reconnect with the original calling to heal rather than to cure alone. So I had to pass on these 2 steps to get to the point what I'm called Ubuntu. Because I am, because you are. You can't be I am if you are not self-loved, self-forgiveness, and self-reconciliated. So Ubuntu values life. A few years ago, I received a call from the pediatric ward for a complex case. She was 15 years old, transferred from the university hospital to our palliative care unit. Her name was Josiane, but she was called Miss Rwanda because she was so pretty. Josiane's story began a few months after she fell on a basketball court while playing at her school. Her right knee was sore, but she was given some painkillers at the health center and returned to school. Her pain was simple, but she walked normally. After a few months, her right knee became abnormally enlarged, and she was sent to the district hospital, which tried to treat her, but with no result. After a few days, the hospital decided to transfer her to the university teaching hospital in Kigali, and the pain had become severe, and the knee was almost the size of a basketball. On arrival at the hospital, Josiane was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, and the surgeon decided to amputate to relieve the pain, sending her to the oncologist for chemotherapy. Unfortunately, the treatment was unsuccessful as the cancer had already metastasized to the lungs and liver, but a physical condition was good. At the hospital, she was being sent to us for palliative care. Josiane was sad because her mom had never come to see since she fell ill. We called the mom, but she refused. And we tried again, and she said, I don't care. We tried every means, administration, calling, we call it even the legal framework, and she said no. So we changed completely the strategy, and we use culture way, how women resolve conflict by sending women healthcare providers to talk to Josiane's mom. So then we understood why Josiane's mom was so sad, and she couldn't come to the hospital. Because she lost her husband and 3 children during the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. In 2000, she married again and had 3 children, of whom Josiane was the oldest. Her husband was an alcoholic who abused and beat her every night for 10 years and died of cirrhosis of the liver. She remarried again for the 3rd time, but had no children. And Josiane's diagnosis was too much pain, and she didn't want to be there. So the strategy worked because she came when Josiane was at the end of her life. And the whole family was surrounding her. So different feelings from Rafiki's stories. a feeling of redemption, joy, gratitude, serenity, hope, compassion, inspiration, and peace. Then I just tried to realize during my time in the US to understand why in Rwanda people don't talk about death. That time I was doing my thesis. Then I just realized that colonization and Christianity caused the shift of meaning of death, which influenced now end-of-life care experiences. In pre-colonial period, death was viewed as an achievement because it was considered as part of normal life, a natural phenomenon. And it was viewed as a natural reprieve, a reward, a well-lived and fulfilled life. And it was reward to be a spirit and ancestor and a high-level presence in the family. Thank you, Danny, to introduce me by Christian, but on my culture, I can't introduce by myself. I need to introduce from my grandfather, my father, and for myself. This is the way we introduce them. So one of the quotes, the participants said, the Rwanda believe in the highest one, Abazimu, and the protected spirit and intercessors which intervene between me and Imana, which is God. So good death and bad death, that time, good death was viewed when the social culture engagement and family members and the community during the die process, it was a privilege from the family to be there, and it was not hardship. So having children that time was the most important criteria the society will define if that person will have a good or a bad death. The more you have people in the room, the more you have a good death. If you are alone, you will have a bad death. Why? Because that time it was really important. When someone died, the family member has to put the dead body on the position of the fetus in the wombs. And that was concluded it's a good death. If you died alone on a very horizontal way, that was concluded a bad death. So the family has to be there as soon as you die, and they need to put the dead body on the position of the fetus in the womb. And that was considered a good death. So such a person who will say, have died with a piece of charcoal in his hand because he dying with no one to help. He died poorly. So death shifted to become a source of fear during the adoption of Christian belief, during the colonial period, because they shifted completely the paradigm of death and the perception end-of-life care. Because the concept of hell and heaven was not familiar in a traditional in Rwanda at that time. So death became now a penalty, a sanction, increasing fear, and changed the perception of death during the dying process. This is why when I'm teaching my students, I have to say, death has to become an achievement, an accomplishment, not only for the patient, but for the family members and also for the healthcare providers. And this is the quote, by the fear of death as a sanction, have a dual and have hell or heaven. And this idea is strictly Christian because death is more threatening today. Ubuntu is also a compassion care. So when we think about Ubuntu, we change completely the paradigm of care. This is why now our program is mostly focused to reducing time, distance, and cost. So we came with this program of palliative care networking, focus on training healthcare providers at the district hospital, at the health center, at the health post, and also at the community. The idea is to make a connection between community and the health post and the health center and the district. Then we can have a patient could be directly sent to the community because palliative care, mostly in Rwanda, has to be provided at the community level. Then just to avoid the patient to go back to the district just to receive a simple dose of morphine or any painkiller, but you can get it at the health posts. So this is one of the training we started at the Rwanda Cancer Center. So then we moved to the district hospital. So then we moved to the health center and also at the community level. So we changed also completely the curriculum because I just realized when I was in medical school, I didn't know anything about palliative care. So instead of to wait after 5, 6 years for a physician to be trained as a medical school, then to train in palliative care, that will be too late. And we changed completely the curriculum and introducing palliative care for undergrad students. How palliative care could be interpreted in a longer language. Palliative care is still in English, and the translate could become really difficult. So we partner with Rwandan artists to help and explain that palliative care means in Kinyarwanda. So they visit patients and families and created powerful artwork to describe their feelings and emotion about palliative care. One photograph took, I love this picture in the middle, and one about this a picture of worn screws and clean needles held by a dirty hand. And he said, in the hospital, people see the disease more than the person. The disease is clear and clean, but the person carrying it, it feels like dirty hands, ignored and unseen. So that photo said more than words and could, that illness hides in those we ignore. At the community, we brought this project we call EGGS Project. It's an initiative of social cohesion, because we just realized if you train community health workers, what I think here in the UK, it's volunteers, we knew that it would be really difficult for them to talk with the patient at the community, because even as for physicians, sometimes it's really difficult to have a serious conversation with the patient and family members. This is why we bring this EGGS project. So we created a simple way to connecting using EGGS. So for one, for nutrition, a second, for social cohesion. Yes, EGGS. So instead of saying, good morning, how are you? The community worker said, oh, good morning, I brought you some eggs. Instead of saying, oh, are you anxious today? We say, do you like your eggs boiled or scrambled? Instead of saying, have you been experiencing anxiety lately? We say, how familiar are you with eggs and raising chicken? So why? Because using eggs, it's a way, not only an icebreaker, but the way you can feel and get a feelings of the patient at the community. Because good morning is not a very friendly introduction. And how are you? This is why we use eggs. I don't know, in UK, maybe you use... I didn't say it, someone said. Yeah, so it's just a different way to create a conversation at the community. And the patient will feel more comfortable to talk because you bring in different parameters, and that parameter you can get a sense of feelings, anxiety, and spiritual support. Ubuntu values culture. I came with this book a long time ago from my 10 years experiences talk with the family members. And I remember when I brought this idea to the hospital, can you bring family members at the hospital and discuss? So all my colleagues said, please don't bring family members in the hospital. And say, why? They're complicated. And we are not paid enough to deal with family members. So, and then I asked them the question, who pays the bill? Who feeds the patient? Who taking care on the psychology of the patient? It's the family member. But how can you bring them? So I came with a different strategy and using this concept, I call it safari concept. So safari means a journey. It's just a journey. It's a Swahili word, a journey from place A to place B. It's nothing with animals. I did my safari from Kigali to London. I didn't see any animals at the airport. And I took the train from London to Norwich. I didn't see any animals. Sometimes even if some people may react like. So what we did, the strategy was to invite the family members. And this is typically Rwandan. So what I do, I invite family members. And you know, in my context, when you invite family members, how many people do you expect will come in the meeting? Just guess. No, 50. Yeah, between 20 and 50 people. So what I do, it's, 50 people, 50. And the last meeting I think I had was 50 people in the room. So what I do, I introduce myself and introduce my team. Then I ask them, can you introduce yourself? I don't ask them, can you introduce from the right to the left, to the left, to the right? I say, can you introduce yourself? And my role is just to observe if the introduction is from the eldest to the youngest. So then I understand this family is typically rooted on a clear values and strong culture. If the introduction is from the youngest to the eldest, that means the hierarchy and the dynamic of the family is more organized by influencer rather than tradition. If the introduction is from female to male, mostly the meeting went. I didn't say anything. I don't know why you are laughing. So the meeting. So that indicates the meeting will go well. But in terms of decision-making process, that will need more meetings. It's typically Rwandan. I don't know in the UK. So, and then I'm asked 5 questions. What the story of the illness is from the first time until now? What does the patient understand about the illness? What information was received from all the physicians? And how do you feel about the care the patient has received? And I like particularly the last question. I'm asking, what are your expectations of me? Because when I'm asked that question, is to find who is the lion or the lioness of the family, the most influential person in the family. And for decision making, that is really important in our context. I'm going to share some examples. So the giraffe suffering, it's a distance. It's mostly family member will come with an unrealistic expectation without considering local resources. In my context, it's more Rwandan diaspora living in UK, US, Canada, and Australia. They will come with a very unrealistic in the district hospital, looking for an oncologist, looking for a CT scan, looking for a PET scan at the district level, which is very unrealistic. Our interpretation is the giraffe expressed skepticism about the local team skills and experiences. So our management, when we find these kind of family members, is just to engage in confident discussion humbly without suppressing the family's ego, because it's really difficult to go higher than a giraffe. So better to use humility to talk with this kind of family. So the hyena suffering is the conflict. It's a family, you'll see family will export conflict from home to the hospital. And if you are not careful, they'll try to create unnecessary conflict between healthcare providers. So when we have this kind of suffering, our interpretation is the experience is mixed emotions because the patient who is the source of conflict is also the source of connection. The family try to recreate the same atmosphere at the hospital. That is the way they will cope with the dying process of the patients. So our management, when we have the hyena suffering, is work with the family, the lion or the lioness of the family. So the tortured suffering armor is mostly family will come with strong shield and deep belief about cure, miracles, prophecies, and philosophy, traditional healing. They believe that the patient will going to cure. So our interpretation is the family still believe there is unfinished task the patient need to do. And our experience is most when the patient just get a green card to live in the US or just got a promotion or need to be graduate very soon. So they believe that is really important for them. So they don't want to have any kind of conversation. So our management, when we have this kind of family members, my advice is to choose your word carefully to communicate effectively. This is what I'm teaching my students. When you see a Christian family, because Rwanda is 95% Christian, please remove your lab coat, remove your stethoscope, take a chair and sit. Instead of introduce yourself, oh, my name is Christian, blah, 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 can you just say, praise God? If you prescribe, you can say, amen. If it's a Muslim family, introducing, say, salam alaikum. And if you prescribe, you say, inshallah. If it's a traditional family, you're using traditional words. That will not reduce not your ego, that will not reduce the way that you are a physician, but that will increase your humanity. The chimpanzee suffering pretension, you will see family members will come gathering more information. They know the last clinical trials, the last medication, the last publications, everything published about the medication, the chemotherapy, radiotherapy, everything they know. So why they pretend to work as healthcare providers? Because it's really important for this kind of suffering, because they, for them, pretend to be like a physician will reduce their anxiety. And we'll see family members with so much information. So what we do is just use simple words to explain complex issues. So the porcupine suffering is most of the patients we have because of the genocide against the Tutsi. You focus on the present, they are focused on the past. So you will feel the present, and the present will feel on the past. So one of the examples, I remember one of the patients was a breast cancer end-of-life stage. And she was a survivor of the genocide. And during the genocide, to survive, she had to put herself under the dead body, and she covered herself of the blood of the dead body. And then when we tried to explain about the cause of breast cancer, she said, no, I know why I have breast cancer. It's because of the blood I put on my body during the genocide against the Tutsi. So the more we feel the present, the more she feels the past. So because we can't have every psychologist for every patient, this is why we don't train only the psychologists, we train the community. So it's about doing counseling without mentioning it's a counseling. Because the more you train the community will surrender the patient and focus on the patient. So I don't have time to talk about the African buffalo suffering the anger when we see patients will come with, sometimes with the physical violence. The elephant suffering with lots of emotion, don't want to say anything in the room. You see the hippopotamus suffering integration, patient will receive chemotherapy in the morning and traditional healers in the afternoon. The scapegoat, snake suffering, the patient and the family members were looking for who has to pay the price, who has to be responsible on that, and mostly it's physicians or nurses. The ostrich suffering, avoidance, people try to avoid communication with the physician, and the chameleon suffering, appearance. The book is available here, limited copies, so for those who want to learn about more, please, you are welcome. So what matters to us? One, it's context. Understand that current model of end-of-life care came from Euro-American clinical and culture experiences. This is why we need to understand that we cannot duplicate a model from UK, US, and Australia in Rwanda. We need to develop a model which is community-centered and based on social Rwandan values. Second, the meaning. Part of my research, I discovered that traditional and end-of-life care existed before modern palliative care existed. They didn't call it palliative care, but palliative care was there. And this is why, if we need to create a global palliative care community, we need to connect also our identities. Connecting community is connected identities. And if we don't connect the identities, we cannot create a community. And also culture. International standard in palliative care could become a source of social injustice if that doesn't take into account some of the critical elements in palliative care in our context. So we have a saying in our culture, when you are well, you belong to yourself, but when you are sick, you belong to your family. It's not only about patient autonomy, it's also about community responsibility. It's both for decision making. And that is something really important, because in terms of patient autonomy, it's about the personal expectation and privacy. For the family, it's family resources and both. It's about both for decision making, not only patients. And what my definition of education is, before to adapt, you need to adopt. You need first to adopt. You adopt the local context before to adapt it to the current challenges. And one of my big mistakes when I was in the US was trying to duplicate a model from the US and trying to be in Rwanda. And I failed many times, until I realized before to adapt, you need first to adopt. You need to adopt the local context before to adapt it to the current challenges. In Kinyarwanda, we don't have end-of-life care because that cannot be translated in my language, but we have life until the end. This is what we say. We don't have end-of-life care because this is typically academic, but we say life until the end. And part of my visit also is to do advocacy, and that's also advocacy to understand that is something we are doing and what we are doing in Africa, because some people don't know exactly what we are doing. And one of my friends say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are probably on the menu. And mostly, you are the main course. One of the said, the doctor in India said, modern hospitals are like fortresses. The poor can't get in, and the rich can't get out. So the Ubuntu model, it's meeting people where they are and when they need. So Ubuntu also values hope as a strategy, not hope as a result, not as a strategy. So one of my roles in Kigali is to do home-based care, visiting patients at home. And I remember this case of this patient. This patient was 35 years old, Clementine, dying with cervical cancer, end of stage, and HIV/AIDS. We found Clementine sleeping in a very poor place. And we bought the mattress, and we bought the bed sheets, and we bought also the blankets. And also we bring morphine. But we just realized she was so poor. It's the house without electricity and without water. And it's a small house with mud, and there is no windows, because the door was the window and the window was the door. And when we came there, we just realized how poor she was. And we asked her husband, can you just stay with your wife? So then you can be able to take care of her. And he said, I'm sorry, because I have also to go to work. And he earned about $1 a day. So we organized to give that $1 a day, then he can stay with Clementine. But I was so shocked by the situation, and the husband agreed to stay with Clementine. I was so shocked with the situation, and I just sat down and took my notebook and wrote, naked but not ashamed, which I put on my book. I feel naked because I failed twice as a physician and Rwandan, cast by my ignorance, fear, ineptitude, and shame. I feel naked when I witness patients dying in pain when they can't get access to strong opioids. I feel naked when I see my colleagues afraid to prescribe a simple dose of morphine because of myth. I feel naked when people call me grave digger because I take care of those already condemned. I feel naked when I see the suffering of family members and caregivers helpless and hopeless to support the patient as they could wish. I feel naked when I visit patients and family members in social, psychological, and spiritual pain. I cry in the palace of God because I don't know where to start. I feel naked when the dignity and value of patients are viewed through the lens of their disease, not their humanity. I feel naked when I see that access to treatment depends on your place in the world. I feel naked when inequity, inequality, social injustice, and the culture of me prevail over the connection between people and culture. I feel naked when people are happy to publish data from developing countries, but less age to support those countries. I feel naked when colleagues from developed countries claim, oh, Christian, what you are doing is not really palliative care. They are focused only on the comparison, not the reality of our compassionate effort to support patients and families with our limited resources. I feel naked when I read the expression of gratitude, satisfaction, hope, and life in the eyes of my patients and their families, just because we are there. But I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed at all, because we are not beholden to the hate, guilt, fear, death, or stigma, but to life, hope, dignity, and Ubuntu. I'm not ashamed because though I cannot do everything, I must do something. I'm not ashamed at all. My conclusion is that if people could become more Ubuntu conscious, as Broderick Johnson said, it should lead to more ordered, caring society based on humanity. And in African context, where modern medical approaches intersect with socio-cultural norm, there is a pressing need for an anthropo-palliative care framework that blends anthropology and palliative care, because the way people died can reflect how the society lives. I would like to thank Clara for the invitation, and Daniel for the 100 emails you sent me, but I couldn't reply all of them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Is that on? Yeah. Thank you, Christian. That was so interesting and so enlightening. So we're going to go out to questions. Stephen, on live stream, do we have any questions?
Nothing online at the moment.
No? Any questions in the auditorium? Everyone was amazed at how amazing it was. Say I said it twice then in 2.5 seconds. Any questions? Oh.
I haven't really got a question, it's just to say thank you. That was amazing, and just to bring those insights, you know, there was a lot of things there that I wasn't aware of with your culture and with the country. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, I was just wondering, the Ubuntu philosophy, is that sort of ancient philosophy you're sort of bringing forth now, or is it just a word that you're using to describe your approach? I'm just wondering if it was a very old cultural way of being, you know, before, like you say, before Christianity and colonization, etc.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. This is the it's a PhD question, actually. If I got scholarship, I can do more research on that. I'm just trying to explore, because part of my experience is my first time when I traveled to US, I didn't know about the Western culture. It was my first time 10, 15 years ago. And part of the culture, what I've learned in the US, I didn't know that eyes contact is really important, because eyes contact is something respectful in a Western country. But in my culture, eyes contact may be totally different, because when you talk to elder person, you need most of the time to bow down your eyes. It's as a sign of respect. And then I just realized, being in the US and also being in Rwanda, it was really difficult to duplicate the model from the US. And one of the experiences was where can I start? What metrics am I going to use? How to develop a different way of thinking? This is why Ubuntu came. And I just realized Ubuntu is part of our well-being. It's part of our life. It's part of our DNA. Maybe it's never been explored, only in South Africa during the reconciliation period after apartheid. But we just realized it can be more than that. And this is what the idea said, why we can't use Ubuntu, developing different metrics of using about well-being and dying well in Rwanda, and using how the sense of Ubuntu. I'm still on the beginning of my research, because there are so many things to learn. And just a small story. The first time when I went to Boston, my director, who is now my mentor, Dr. Eric Krakow, inviting me for shadowing at the hospital. And I went to the hospital. I found the room. It was a very fancy room, very big room. And I was joking, Eric, this room, just for one patient, is so big. Because I can live with my whole family in this room, because it was so fancy, so big. And the first day, the patient was alone. The second day was alone. The third. And then I spent 2 weeks. I was asking. I saw the patient was there, surrounded by pictures. So many pictures, white and black colors. And then I asked Eric, where are those people? And Eric said, oh, you know, Christian, this is East Coast, and we have West Coast. So people, the family live in the West Coast. This is why the patient is alone. And I say, Eric, is there any flight from East to West? I was very naive that time. And they said, yeah, there is, we have a Delta, we have JetBlue, we have Southwest. And I said, why people cannot, if they are part of the picture, why they can travel from West Coast and come to the East Coast? And Eric was kind of tired with my so many questions. And he said, what about Rwanda? And said, in Rwanda, we don't have pictures because we have people in the room. So I think what we can learn from us, how to bring back those people from the picture to the reality. And that's what I said it's about Ubuntu, that connecting people. And the 3 steps was really important to me when I went to the training, because I was expecting to learn about the suffering of the patient, but it was my own suffering. I didn't love myself enough to respect the suffering of the patient. I didn't forgive enough to be able to understand the mistakes of the patient. And I couldn't reconcile for my own story to be able to reconcile the story of the patient and family members. And that is why that's a step I'm taking now, and to change completely the paradigm of palliative care in Rwanda.
Danny, sorry, they've got several drifts come through now online.
Okay, we can probably take one more question, and then, yeah.
Can the safari model be used to describe incidents and experience for other African countries?
I think not African countries, I think everywhere. Claire was asking me who are the most people, because I saw the statistic on Amazon, and they say the most people who purchased my book is people from US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. So normally I wrote this book to, because my colleague was pissed me off. That is the reason I wrote that book, because they called me grave digger. So I was so tired, and they say, let me just write them and explain them what I'm doing. So then I wrote about the safari, because that came from experience of 10 years discussing with the family. And my experience is most of the time when I'm traveling, I'm using metaphor, which is talk to us, but I don't know in the UK, what could be the metaphor explaining about the hyena? What would be the metaphor about the giraffe? What would be the metaphor be using about the tortoise? Those family members come very complicated at the school. How can you describe it? That is the metaphor. So I think it's not only applying in Africa, but mostly everywhere in the world, because I'm using language everyone can understand, and I hope that will apply. Just to conclude, I'm sorry for that. Understand also the context is really important. And one of the story I'm saying, it's how community is really involved on fixing and resolving and giving solutions. And I remember when we had a wedding with my wife many years ago, because I had a small budget for my wedding, so I invited only 600 people, okay? Because the budget was very small. Only 600 people. But during the wedding, I was surprised, 1,000 people show up. I was stressed because you see invitees, crowded. And I was stressed because I said, at the end of the party, I need to pay. But when they finished the wedding, I went there and someone said, no, don't worry, because everything was paid. And I said, who paid? I said, no, people paid about that. So this is how the community works, and I hope also how the safari concept will be happening about families, just communication between families. So thank you.